Hello, and welcome to Mental Health Matters. I'm your host, Liz Lang. Each week on this podcast, we will break down various aspects of mental health. We are so excited you're here and hope you enjoy this week's episode. Hey guys, Liz Lang here with Jeremiah and Selina Woodruff from Core Connection. And this week we are going to get into how to respond when your teen is exposed to pornography. And we want to give you a heads up that we will be discussing sexuality and pornography, and listener discretion is advised in case you have young ears listening. But first, I'm going to do this week's parenting moment. And it comes from a social media influencer. His name is Dr. Tommy Martin, and he is a pediatrician. So he posted a video talking about not judging parents for giving their kids high-calorie foods. And so he posted a picture of him and his son, and his son was eating goldfish. And everyone's like, how could you give your kid goldfish? You're a pediatrician. And I'm like, whoa, wait. Don't come at goldfish, okay? That was my initial reaction. But the point he was making in this video is calories count for kids. And so, picky eating can be really hard for kids. And this really resonated with me because my son is such a picky eater. He ended up with a G-tube. Okay, that's a little bit extreme. There's other issues here going on. But the point is I totally agree with him. Kids need calories to develop and to grow. And so picky eating, it's a very real struggle and it's a very big struggle. And we have enough parent guilt as it is. So I totally agree. Don't feel guilty because you gave your kid goldfish or veggie straws or popcorn or whatever it is that your kid is willing to eat, because what kids definitely do need is calories, and all calories count with picky eaters. So that's my parenting moment. Don't shame other parents for feeding their kids.
Hey, I think that's true probably across the board on lots of things. All of us parents are pretty much trying to survive and trying to do the best we can and to keep ourselves alive on top of that. And so I think across the board, everyone's got their different things that they do or do differently. Let's just give each other grace and support each other.
Yep. Same thing goes with breastfeeding versus formula. I'm in that battle right now, and I'm very fortunate because I'm able to breastfeed my kids, and I've been very fortunate. But it doesn't work for all moms, and fed really is best. So just let it go, because fed is best. Don't shame moms. Fed is best. The end.
Go eat yourself some goldfish yourself.
Right? Or a fruit snack, okay? Like whatever your vice is. I eat probably an unhealthy amount of Reese's peanut butter cups. So
I won't shame you.
Me
Good
either.
for you.
Yeah. All right. So pornography, really big deal, really important to talk about in terms of teen and development. There will be a link posted in our show notes referencing Fight the New Drug. It is a fantastic website that has gathered a ton of research from reputable sources about the dangers of pornography. And one of their focuses is pornography in teens. And so in a 2023 study, all participants reported that they were exposed to porn by the age of 12. And what is really alarming is over 46% of young people reported that they saw online porn for the first time when it just popped up. And 22% reported that someone else showed it to them when they weren't expecting it. That is why we have said in the past that giving your kids unfiltered access to the internet, to a smartphone, really anything where they can just Google things, is dangerous for this very reason, because accidental porn exposure is a very, very real thing, and it's not good for their developing brain. So your first reaction might be big, right? Like, oh my goodness, maybe there's going to be panic. There's going to be some fear. That's normal, and it's okay to feel those. But I think this is one of those things where it is really important to practice how you're going to react ahead of time. So it's one of those things where if you think about it, okay, imagine I either catch my kid viewing porn, or my kid comes to me and says they've seen porn online, or they've seen some type of pornographic image. it's great to rehearse and to practice how you're going to react to that. What are your guys' thoughts?
I think it's so great that you shared those statistics, because although they might be scary, I think it's just the reality of the world we live in. And so instead of being fearful, we can be prepared and to understand and accept what's going to happen. Unfortunately, it seems more of not a if, but a when. So if you're prepared and understand, even with all the filters and things that you can try to prevent and block, then you know and will be equipped to know what to do when that situation does arise.
Yeah, I like the idea of practicing how you might respond. The real struggle with pornography, when we really get into the depths of it, is shame. And when we freak out, it puts our children right into this shame mode. If we freak out about them, viewing porn, either accidentally or choosing to do it, because they don't really understand. They don't understand the ramifications. They don't understand the consequences that come in the future with pornography usage. And so when we freak out, they go into shame mode. And when they go into shame mode, shame always conceals, it hides. And we're really just not going to make any progress. Now, if you have freaked out, it's okay. It doesn't mean we can't, correct that and get back on track. But I do love the idea of practicing how you might respond. And I think that it's important to continue discussing what you kind of started off with, and that is that the probability of your child being exposed to porn is almost 100% now. Yep. And it's really unfortunate and it's sad, but it is the reality. And so sometimes we just have to kind of come to grips with the idea that, look, they're going to see things we don't want them to see. They're going to hear things we don't want them to hear. They're going to go to school. They're going to be on a bus. They're going to be with friends. They're just, we can't protect them from everything. We have to help them to learn to live in the world that we live in healthy and appropriate ways, and to know what to do when certain things happen or when they're exposed to certain things. And that's, I think, the real goal of our parenting.
Well, practicing could include them, right? And we've talked before about how it's not some big talk that we sit down and we have this talk with them, but ongoing conversation. For example, hey, you ride the bus. I know you're older. I know kids are saying things. I know things are happening on the bus. How do you feel about that? Do you have any questions? As they get older, or you're allowing them on certain websites or opening up more access to things or giving them a phone. Those conversations can come throughout just the natural progression of life and in your everyday life, and asking them questions of what they have questions about or things that they have learned or seen or heard or exposed to, and having them in that conversation of when that is to happen, how would they respond, how would they react, and how they can come and talk to you.
Another really big issue surrounding this topic is how normalized pornography is. It's expected, right? So, males are going to look at porn, and that's just a part of normal life. It can be part of a normal relationship, and people just accept that as normal. The problem is it's not normal and it's not healthy. Now, in terms of adults, that's a whole other issue. Okay, so that gets into the realm of, you're an adult, you have the right to do as you will. Okay, but when it comes to teenagers, it is not good for their development. It literally can alter the chemistry in their brain. Another really big problem is that it sets highly unrealistic expectations around consent, around what a healthy sexual relationship looks like, and what sexual arousal can look like. And so teens being exposed to porn is not a good thing, and it's not healthy, male or female. I'm not going to say it's worse for one or the other, because it's just not good all around. And that's one of the things that I love about Fight the New Drug, is it exposes that, and it talks about the dangers of porn, and particularly the dangers of teenagers in porn. And so this is why it is so important to have these conversations and start having them early. Hey, this is why I set this boundary in place. I don't just give you unfiltered access to the internet because I am actually trying to protect you, but there are safe ways to use the internet, and I can guide you through that.
Yeah, you said a whole lot there, and there are a couple of things that I want to respond to real quick, Liz. First of all, if we back way up to the beginning of your comments here just a moment ago, you talked about boys looking at pornography. I want to make something super clear, and I'll tell you why this is really important in a moment, but boys and girls both view pornography almost at an equal rate. It is not different. And one of the things that we see happening is that girls feel probably a higher level of shame because it's portrayed as a boy problem. And when we treat it as just a boy problem, we put girls into a shame cycle because they think, ooh, well, what's wrong with me? Because girls don't look at pornography, but I am. And so I'm different, or there's something extra wrong with me. Not only am I looking at porn, but I have something else going on. And we really, really dig deep into this shame cycle, and we do not want to do that.
Right.
So it's important to recognize for our listeners that boys and girls both look at pornography. Often they view it differently. They utilize it in different methods. It's not just images. Girls often tend to like the stories, right? So they often will read smut novels that will arouse them and elicit those same kinds of feelings that boys will gain from viewing pornography. And it's not that girls don't view it, because they do. And so we want to be really careful that there's not just one box that we can put all of this in. It's a vast problem with lots of different complexities. And you're certainly correct that it not only can, it does change the chemistry of the brain. It can create lots of problems in later relationships and even early relationships. It can be contributed to a lot of unhealthy sexual behaviors in teenage relationships. I don't know all of the statistics. I would have to pull them up. I don't have them in front of me, but the volume of pornography that's uploaded every day to the internet, the number of hours is just astounding. It is unbelievable what's out there and what's available for our kids to view. And so as parents, we need to understand like the consequences of pornography usage for our children. Of course, we could talk about adults, but this is a podcast about parent-teen relationships. So I think that's where we're going to keep focused. I'll argue all day long that pornography is unhealthy for anyone at any time. And it's never been a good thing. There are those who will claim that, oh, well, it's consensual between my wife and I. And we no, garbage, absolute garbage. It's never going to be healthy. And if you believe it is, I think you're lying to yourself. And I might get a little bit of hate for that. And that's okay with me. I understand relationships very well. And I just have a real hard time believing that it's ever a healthy thing. But it is more impactful often with teenagers because they're exploring their own sexuality. They're exploring their bodies and how things work. And there's a huge volume of curiosity that comes from them and a lack of understanding. Selina mentioned the talk. Gosh, I hate that phrase too. I can't tell you how many times I've been asked, like, well, when did you have the talk with your kids? The talk? There is no the talk. There is open conversation in our home about sexuality, about pornography, about our bodies, about what we see, about the way they're used, about relationships, and quite a bit of conversation surrounding the topic of consent and the importance of that and the mutual respect of others and our own bodies. And so these conversations have to happen in our homes and with our children on a regular basis to help normalize the reality that we're human beings and we're sexual creatures. We have these desires, and I believe they come from God, and they're good desires, but sometimes they're misused a little bit. And that's especially true in the world of pornography. Liz, you also mentioned the dangers of like pornography and reality, right?
Yeah.
So much of that stuff's enhanced and we have AI generating it now. And, it's just crazy, unrealistic. And you're right. It does create these unrealistic expectations, especially if we look at, young folks getting into romantic relationships who have viewed pornography. They're going to have some expectations maybe that just aren't real. They're not realistic, and it creates lots of challenges there for them. I guess to boil down everything that I'm saying here is that as parents, we do have this responsibility. We want to keep our kids safe. We want to use filters. We want to do what we can. Now we just can't block them from the world though, right?
Right.
A lot of parents out of fear, well, I'm never getting my kid a smartphone, or I'm never going to allow internet in my house. Man, you're missing the point here. The point is that we've got to be able to work with our children to live in reality and to teach them to manage themselves, to manage their emotions, to manage their appetites and their desires and to understand them. And that's our role as parents, right? That's our responsibility. That's what we get to do as we help them navigate through the teenage years of life. And it could be a fun journey. This doesn't have to be miserable. And just being prepared as a parent is such a big key.
Right. And so this is why the focus of connection is so important, because the idea is that you have created a safe, open space with your child so that you've talked about these things. So when they are exposed to porn, maybe it was accidental, or maybe they just got curious and, they did it themselves and you found out about it, or something happens, right? So when this does happen, you've created this safe space so that you can talk openly about it. And that's really what's going to be important here. So, because you also want to think, what is my long-term goal in terms of my child and whatever this issue is? The long-term goal is probably for them to have a healthy, happy, successful relationship in the future. So as human beings, we are hardwired to connect. Human connection is not just something that we desire or something that we want or hope that happens. It's a physiological need. And pornography kind of puts a big halt to that because it's not real, it's fake. And so you want your kid to be able to have a healthy, successful relationship and all that it contains, including intimacy, healthy sexuality, healthy desire, all of those things. And so when you create a space of connection and openness with your kid, you're enabling that. And you're setting them up for long-term success in that they can talk to you, they can safely express how they felt. I think another thing that's important to acknowledge is that even when you accidentally view pornography, no matter how it happens, it's going to elicit desire. It's going to elicit curiosity. You're going to feel things, and that is normal, and it doesn't mean you're bad. I think that's really important for kids to understand. And it's important to help your child understand that, okay, so you saw this image that's pornographic and you felt something, you felt curiosity, you wanted to look at it more. That's normal. And that's not a bad thing. It doesn't mean you're bad. It just means you're a human being. And as human beings, we're sexual creatures and we like sexual things. That's normal and appropriate, but there's a time and a place for it. And pornography is not the time or the place.
Yeah. I wanted to also just mention here that even if you have a great connection with one of your children, it's still possible that they could look at pornography and you never know about it. So yep. I don't want parents to feel like they're a failure. Or I don't have a good enough connection because my kid didn't come to me. I found out when they were in their 30s that they had been looking at pornography. Like sometimes these things happen. We're just trying to create the best possible environment for openness and for conversation. And that is when we have a great connection. And we need to do all the things as a parent. We need to look at search history on computers and devices. We need to be having conversations with our kids and asking them questions. Asking them questions about whether or not they've seen it is not going to make them look at it more or less. There's nothing wrong with you talking to your children and like, hey, have you ever seen something on TV or on the internet that you felt like was inappropriate or not properly dressed men or women or things like that? And opening up those conversations, they might not come to you, so coming to them might make it easier. It really just depends on the child and the situation, but having those open connections is really, really important.
Yeah, absolutely. So another thing that I think would be helpful here is to discuss is how we can decrease that curiosity element. And a lot of it we've already mentioned, and it's this ongoing conversation about the human body and about sexuality in general. It's that ongoing conversation and creating this culture in our home where we can talk openly about sex, and it's okay to talk about sex. Creating that culture within your home is a really big step. So one of the things that I think is really important for parents to do in terms of kind of eliminating that element of curiosity to an extent. I don't think it's ever going to be possible to completely eliminate it because kids are just naturally curious.
Yep, especially about something that they don't have experience with, right? And their own bodies and what happens.
Yes.
It's going to be pretty tough.
Right. But there are things that you can do to help minimize that curiosity element. And that's labeling body parts, all of the body parts. So, female anatomy, there's a lot of different parts. You want to explain to them, this is what it is. And then cross-gender explanation of body parts, right? So I think it's very healthy and appropriate for young girls to understand male anatomy. It's also very healthy and appropriate for young males to understand female anatomy. That's very helpful just into minimize curiosity. That way they're less likely, and I can't say that they're never going to, because as we said, kids are curious, but it does help make it maybe a little less likely that they're going to go searching for it on their own because they already have the information.
Yeah, it would definitely be helpful. One of the struggles here, Liz, is that a lot of folks struggle to even have a conversation about sexuality with their partner. And so this can be really uncomfortable for a lot of our listeners to have these kinds of conversations and be open at home. And all I can say is start practicing. Start practicing the conversations. Start with your partner and have a conversation with them. Yeah, it's going to be a little bit uncomfortable possibly. And it's definitely going to be uncomfortable if you've got a 16-year-old child, and they're going to be uncomfortable most likely, but they'll be deeply grateful for it at some point in life. It's not too late to start having these conversations and start opening up to them. And we want to be easy. We're not talking about getting into the details of intimacy. We're talking about the basics here and human anatomy. And, it doesn't have to be miserable, but it can be a little bit uncomfortable. And I recognize that. So start practicing.
Yeah, and the thought you can have is this is going to be uncomfortable. So when it is, it's what you expect it to be. There's nothing wrong with being uncomfortable, right? So I think sometimes we're trying to get rid of that negative feeling that we have, but just practice being uncomfortable, or it's okay to be uncomfortable. This is going to be uncomfortable, but this is what I want to accomplish with my kids. Something else I thought about, I couldn't help but think about when you were talking about minimizing and talking about those natural feelings that come. Because I think sometimes when you see pornography and it arouses those feelings, and then you're told it's bad, it's very confusing when you have that feelings in other places of your life. Like if you like somebody. And so I thought I had maybe with minimizing or helping with understanding some of those feelings and desires is that when they do like somebody, and that comes at all ages, right? You've got 5-year-olds that like have a crush, or 8-year-olds that like somebody, or I think understanding and accepting like, hey, of course that's natural. Of course you like somebody else. That feels good, huh? It feels good when you like somebody else. Instead of at that moment being like, no, you can't, you're too young, that kind of stuff. And not to say that you shouldn't have boundaries or guidelines or teaching them through that, but maybe just using the verbiage and understanding that, yeah, we like somebody. Yeah, we have those feelings.
Well, Selina, I think what you're getting at is the shame cycle, right? When we tell kids, oh, that's bad, it's bad that you looked at pornography, they have these natural feelings and these natural desires and urges that come, and now they think that they are bad and they label themselves as bad. And so when they start to have a crush maybe on someone, then they start to feel like I'm bad. And anytime we get into that shame cycle, now we want to conceal and hide. So we're not going to tell mom and dad that, hey, I like this person, or, hey, I saw something maybe I shouldn't have seen because I feel bad. I feel gross. I feel nasty. And so that's why we want to make sure, like Selina's saying, that we're saying, of course, it looked nice to see that naked person on the internet. Of course you had these feelings. That's normal. That's how we're built as human beings. And here's why we don't want to be looking at things like that. Here's what this means. Here's why we say that, hey, we don't want you looking at those things because of the consequences that are going to come. Same thing with dating, right? You're 12 years old, like dating, it can get complicated. Of course you have feelings and you like people. This is normal and natural. And it's a good time to just be friends and develop friendships and relationships and recognize that, yeah, of course you like someone, because eventually that's the direction you're going to go. Eventually we pair off and we create families through marriage and things like that. And so we want to normalize that and naturalize it and help them see that this is the way it works.
I love this idea of normalizing being human and normalizing the human experience. And that is going to be critical when they form any type of sexual relationship in the future. So when you label it as bad or shameful or harmful or hurtful, right? Having those feelings, those sexual feelings, right? I'm not talking about labeling pornography that. You should label pornography that. But we want to be careful that we don't send kids the message that sex itself is bad or sexuality is bad, because it's very much a part of the normal human relationship. And this is often seen in religious cultures where abstinence before marriage is practiced. We see this often because people get their whole identity tied into this idea of, I've been celibate my whole life and I've waited until marriage to have sex. And then they get married, and then sex is this weird foreign thing to them that can be uncomfortable, or they can often feel shameful or guilty about having sex. And that's not what we want at all. So I love and appreciate this idea that it's good to normalize that we are sexual beings and we're going to feel sexual feelings even at a young age. And that's not bad. That's healthy. That's normal. It's just using those feelings appropriately.
Yeah, I think that's super important to understand. And we definitely see some of those struggles in the culture of some religions, ours being one of those that we can see that kind of that idea of celibacy creeping into create problems early on in marriages, when the reality is celibacy is wonderful prior to marriage. I actually think it's a very healthy thing and a very good thing, but not because sex is bad, but because sexuality should be shared with a single partner. That's where our greatest safety and security comes. It's such a vulnerable thing, and it's just such a fulfilling experience to share that with only one person instead of whoever you date, like maybe the world might teach today. And we might get some hate for that, and that's okay too. But the reality is that the research backs this up, and that's what's interesting. And there's lots of great and strong relationships that can support that. But kind of getting back to this topic of pornography and the struggles that can be for parents to have these conversations and to know what to do. I think it might be good for parents to kind of take a multi-step approach when they discover that either their kid has been exposed or that their child is using pornography. And I think the first and important step here is that we want to pause and we want to regulate ourselves. Where are we at? Am I freaking out here? I probably am. Of course you're freaking out. Your 10-year-old son just came to you and said, Mom, I saw a naked person on, the internet. Holy crap. Are you kidding me? What is going on? Right? We're going to freak out a little bit, but we want to manage how that comes across to them. And so we want to pause, take a minute, regulate ourselves, get us into a position, and then lead with empathy. Man, I'm really glad that you shared that with me. That must have been kind of confusing and uncomfortable for you to see that. And then we can start asking questions like, what did you think? What was that like for you? How's that making you feel? And then, of course, we're going to start to provide age-appropriate education and things like that. Mm-hmm. This is natural and normal. And what questions do you have about it that I could answer for you? And then, at a certain point when they're ready, we can talk about the unrealistic portrayal of sex through pornography, and we can teach our values and reinforce those values without creating shame and those kinds of things. And then we can work with them on boundaries and creating more boundaries to help protect them. I like the idea of collaborating with kids on boundaries. And what do you think we could do to help you not see this again? Or what could we do to create a family expectation that says, hey, this is what we do when we see this? Those are great opportunities to create connection and to collaborate with our children on creating the environment that we want in our home surrounding things like pornography.
Taking that approach is going to come across a lot better and not like punishment. Because if we're just like, oh, you can't be on the computer anymore, and start putting, I think, just really in check, making sure we're not punishing, because that could fuel into more shame and that they're wrong. Like if they think what happened was wrong. And so I think helping with that language and like you said, just collaborating on those boundaries and they have a say in it, then it helps it to not feel like a punishment and that it feels like a protection.
Now, of course, I agree with you, Selina. And we also need to look at, there's a difference here between an accidental exposure or a natural exposure and pornography usage. If our child is using pornography, I still think we collaborate. I still think we have kind of the same approach, but we still work with them on creating boundaries that help protect them and help them. And definitely, if we can, we want to get professional help. That could be a real challenge with pornography because the world of mental health, the insurance companies and the powers that be don't see things the way we see them when it comes to pornography quite often. And so there could be some struggles there, but there are groups and organizations that do wonderful things that help kids who are using pornography to stop. I love that you mentioned Fight the New Drug. What a wonderful organization. They do some great work and provide some great information and understanding for a lot of us. And there's about 1 billion others that help as well and do wonderful things. A lot of times your church will have some things that could be helpful, whatever religion you're a part of, if you are a part of a church. So there's different things that we can do if they are using. And I know this particular podcast isn't so much about using, but I think it is important to differentiate. And I still wouldn't look at punishing a child for using pornography. Again, this is a collaboration effect. We want to collaborate together. What do you want from this? How do we help you? We're not just going to allow it. We're going to put filters on, the internet at home. We're going to create healthy boundaries that we should probably already have. Like we don't take screens in the bathroom. We don't have phones in our rooms. We don't have computers in our rooms. In fact, in our house, we don't have TVs in our rooms. All for these reasons, because it's going to come in from every direction. And even in our home, we don't sit at the kitchen table where the screen is facing the back wall and nobody can see what you're on, right? And it's not a punishment. It's just a boundary that says, hey, everybody, this is where I'm at and I don't have anything to hide. We don't have to worry about anything. And so those are important boundaries to put in place, but we should work with our kids. And just for a disclaimer here, Selina and I have made plenty of mistakes in this area with our own children and probably created shame for some of them in some of these types of scenarios. Obviously unintentional, but it happens. And hopefully the things that we're sharing might be helpful for other families to maybe not make some of the mistakes that we've made. Some of the things that we share here, we learn through our own experience. Some of it's through the work that we do. Some of it's through education. But at the end of the day, we just want to help folks who want to help their children and have a better experience, have better connection, and learn how to respond to difficult situations like this sometimes.
As hard as it is, I am grateful for those mistakes that I've been able to learn from so that I can see it in a different way. I've seen both sides of it. And so I am grateful, even though I have made those mistakes, to have the knowledge and the opportunity to keep trying and keep growing and keep trying to do good with my kids.
Yeah, and I really appreciate the difference between boundaries and punishment. And I think it's important to differentiate that, because if your kid is actively seeking and viewing and using pornography, it is important to say, we are going to set some additional boundaries in place. This is not a punishment, but this is not acceptable to be used in our home, and we are not going to tolerate it. That is a boundary, not a punishment. Now, that doesn't mean your kid's going to see it that way. They may still view it as a punishment, and there's nothing you can do about that, but that doesn't mean you don't set the boundary. So say it, but again, you can say whatever you want. There's no way to make your teen believe anything you say. That's the reality of parenting.
That's true. And they may view things differently. And, I tend to use the word consequences rather than punishment. Sometimes a consequence of using my phone in a way that's not appropriate is that I no longer have access to use the phone. That's just the consequence, right? If we're using it for things other than its intended purpose, then maybe we don't need access to the phone. And it just depends. We want to be careful that we're not going down a road of shame, but we're going down a road of help and understanding and compassion and, of course, connection.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, next week we are going to get into bullying, and we will see you all then. Have a question? How about a topic you'd like us to cover? Send us an email at mentalhealthpod21@gmail.com.